So the machine learning is not through attention. It is just through a mechanical process which is based on various options. That is, if this is the situation, then this should be the action or response, and so on. So it is totally mechanical, and that mechanical things can bring a very quick response. That means, say, a machine driving a car and a human being driving a car. The human response may be slow, but the machine's response will be very quick. That is because it functions mechanically. It doesn't have to pay attention or learn again. The response is already programmed and it responds very quickly. So attention is something which is a living quality. And it also means the energy. There is no attention, there is no energy also. This attention, when focused on a particular thing exclusively, that means you exclude everything else except this one, then that becomes concentration. And then concentration has its own ways of functioning, because then concentration is accompanied by distraction and again concentration. Now you may say that is inattention similar to concentration? Inattention means no flow of energy. You are being simply taken over by something, or may not be taken over by anything, but there is no flow of energy. While in concentration there is a flow of energy. So the concentration is not same as inattention. Concentration only means that the attention is tethered or focused on one particular thing to the exclusion of everything else. So there is a flow of energy. But then there is also a distraction. And therefore concentration and distraction, so flow of energy getting diverted from one to another and therefore there is a conflict and the fatigue resulting out of that. But in attention there is no selection as such. Whatever that happens to be there, the energy flows. So if there are several things, then energy may flow at several things, but then there is no conflict in that flow of energy. Because in concentration there is a demand that all the energy must be towards this particular thing, and all the other things, they don't matter. But all the other things are also demanding their share of energy, and therefore there is a conflict. But in attention there is no conflict. So to learn anything new, to learn about anything, attention is required. Without attention probably you can't learn. We are not talking about mechanical learning, because mechanical learning may not be able to discover something. The discoveries and the deeper understanding that can happen through attention. Machines can only invent. Maybe they will modify and make a better and better machine, responding in a better and better way, efficient way, and so on. So it is just a rearrangement modification, but nothing which is radically new, radically different. So learning needs attention. Without attention, you can't learn. And we have said that the attention is paid to psychological reactions, which means that there is a flow of energy towards that psychological reaction. So out of that, the observation happens. So you observe that psychological reaction, or that reaction is getting observed. And in that observation, all the details and everything is seen. And not only seen, but as the reaction unfolds, that whole process of unfoldment is observed as it happens. And when the reaction has completely unfolded itself, then there is nothing more to be seen, to be watched. And therefore, that reaction comes to an end. But then, what is the quality of the mind which is attentive? It has lots of energy. It is quiet. There is nothing particular to which it is tethered. So it is like the mind is just ready to focus on anything. There is a complete gathering of energy, and with that kind of energy, the mind then becomes receptive to the deeper and subtler aspects of existence. Because if the mind is occupied with all its activities in the realm of thought, then it is not ready to come upon those deeper and subtler aspects. It can't receive, it's not sensitive enough, it is not open to that dimension. So the energy of attention, not particularly focused on anything, and that attention is paid to understand something, then that thing, it unfolds. This you can actually do and verify, you can find out. Now, when is it easier to pay attention? You must have noticed that whenever you are interested in something, your attention naturally goes there. If you are interested in listening to something, then you pay attention to that. So then attention has no effort. It goes naturally in that way. And your interest, usually it is guided by the self, whatever the self is interested in. So a person interested in making money, so anything which will help him in earning more money or making more money will attract his attention. So there his attention will naturally go. He doesn't have to make effort for that. But then it becomes concentration as it gets focused on that. So if interest is responsible for drawing the attention or attracting the attention, and that intention, it is self-centered, means the self is desiring something and then therefore it wants to pay attention, but then the attention paid by the self becomes the concentration. It is no longer attention. So it is no longer that quality which is capable of exploring the subtler aspects. So that is why we said that when all this activity of the thinker comes to an end, and yet there is this quality of attention, then such a mind is capable of meditation, because it has gathered all its energy, it has gathered all its resources, and it is ready to focus all of that to find out that other dimension of existence. And only in that case there is a possibility arises of the opening of the other dimension. Again, you may have noticed that if you love somebody, if you like somebody, if you love somebody, then you pay attention to that somebody naturally. You don't have any sense of effort there. Then you are interested in that person, then you will pay your whole attention without the sense of effort, because then attention is not an effort. It goes naturally there. And so, in a way, you can say that out of love, a state of attention can arise, which will then can open up that different dimension. So meditation is coming in contact with the deeper and subtler aspects of life. So when those deeper and subtler aspects, the mind is in contact with them, then it is said that it is in the state of meditation. And those things then will be visible or will be functional in one's life. We have also said that freedom is very much necessary for meditation to happen, because a mind which is not free cannot meditate, or if at all meditates, that meditation will be a very limited affair. It will be only restricted to producing certain effects but no contact with the deeper and subtler aspects of existence. And Krishnaji puts freedom and love together, because love can flourish only in freedom. Without freedom, that love cannot be there. Love is like that pure water which cannot be poured into a contaminated glass. So, in the state of meditation, there are all these qualities: quality of freedom, quality of love, and there is also an intelligence. Because when understanding happens in the state of meditation, that understanding is very, very different than the understanding which we have in terms of knowledge. Because in knowledge, the understanding is implied. That means you use the property of logic, rationality of the thinking, and then through that you imply that if this is like this, then this is also there. So most of the knowledge is implied based on certain observations and the implications, because lots of things are not sensible to us, because our senses, they have very limited capabilities. So therefore, the knowledge about things which are beyond the capacity of sensory organs is mostly an implied knowledge. And that implied knowledge is, of course, verified through experiments and so on. So that is the understanding in the field of knowledge. But in the mind in meditative state, understand things in a completely different way. That understanding is in terms of, we can call it as realization. Krishnaji would call it as perception. So there is the complete perception of that thing. It may be a reaction, it may be object, it may be anything. So there is no need for logic and rationality. The understanding is not based on that. The understanding is direct perception of something. And that direct perception, when it is expressed in terms of knowledge, then it appears completely logical and rational. So the perception expressed in terms of knowledge is always logical and rational. But perception itself is not the product of rationalization and logical thinking. So this difference, I think, should be clearly understood. And in perception, the perception is whole, in the sense that if there is an action which is emerging out of that perception, then there is no gap between the action and the perception. The perception includes action. So it doesn't mean that first you perceive and then you act. That is how the action in the realm of thought happens. You must have observed that all our actions which are based on thought. So first the thought arises, and then after rising of that thought, you may act according to that thought, or you may not act, depending upon the other factors. Because we have so many different kinds of thoughts in our mind at different times, and all those thoughts, they don't materialize into action. What will make them materialize into action are the psychological factors. If you are interested psychologically in something, then you may be doing, working, or acting according to that. But if you are not interested, or maybe there are other factors, maybe laziness, maybe postponement, maybe a lot of other psychological factors, then that thought will remain only as a thought, but may not take the form of action. But in perception, the action is immediate, which means that if something is perceived as false, then immediately there is an action, and the action is the false gets dropped. Something is seen as false, and the moment it is seen as false, then it is finished, gone. It's no longer there. So if the illusion is seen as illusion, it is gone. There is immediate action. But if the thinker sees something as false, there may not be immediate action of dropping it. Because how often we see things as wrong and yet we continue with them. So there is always a gap between thought and action. And during that gap, lots of other factors, they play their role, and therefore the action is prevented. But that is not so with perception. So a meditative mind living daily life, it has its own ways of attending to things. And in that there is no conflict of any kind. So that is how I think all these qualities, they are related to meditation. Because in the state of meditation, all these qualities, they flourish. Krishnaji has described at some place that there was an explosion of love in that state of meditation. So what is this explosion of love? Well, you may ask, how can love explode and so on? But we have seen that love is not only a quality, but love is also an energy, and energy can explode. That means there is a sudden release of energy, and probably that's what gives rise to ecstasy. So a meditative life or a meditative mind, when it functions in day-to-day life, then it brings its own quality to everything that is being done, because it will be always accompanied by that quality of attention, all the actions. And that quality of attention means doing things rightly, thoroughly, and completely. And in that, there is the joy of doing. It's not that you are treating everything as a work. Probably for a meditative mind, there is no such thing as work, because work means something which you have to do, whether you like it or you don't like it. And many times, work is different than our interests, work is different than our life, and so on. But here, it's not that. There is joy in every action. So there is no sense of work. The whole process itself is enjoyed. Not that first the action and then enjoying the results of that action. Because the action is not going to leave any residue behind. Because otherwise that residue will become a psychological content. So no psychological residue. And therefore, the action itself is the joy, and not joy at the end of the action when the results are there. Because it's the thinker who wants to enjoy the results. Because result gives the thinker a special status, and it likes that special status because it gets further strengthened through that. But here there is nothing to be strengthened, because there is no entity, there is no center, and therefore all action is a joy. Now this meditative state may not be there for all the time. Krishnaji has described in his notebook that that state remained for an hour by watch. So it is interesting that he is talking about a timeless state, and he is saying that that timeless state lasted for about an hour by watch. So that timeless state is the quality of the mind, which is not thinking in terms of time. There is no sense of time there. So there is no waiting. But the chronological time goes on. So by that measure, one can say that, well, that state lasted for one chronological hour. But there was no sense psychologically of time. So Krishnaji has also talked about healing and many things happening in the state of meditation. And if one gets caught up in those things, then the meditation is over. It is no longer meditation. So he points out that a wise person keeps away from all these things, because that meditative state itself is significant, itself is important. And if things happen in that state, okay, let them happen, but don't get caught up with them. So he has talked about healing, then he has talked about telepathy, then he has talked about many other things. And then the kind of life one lives in the state of this kind of meditation, Krishnaji calls it as the truly religious life, because a life lived this way is always gathering energy. In fact, there is no shortage of energy at all, because you see, there is total order. And we have said that in nature there is total order. Cosmos means total absolute order. And if there is an order, that order means that you have the whole energy of the nature available, but not for the self, but that whole energy can function, if required, through that meditative mind. Not that the meditative mind uses or wants to utilize all that energy. It's only the self which will like to have all that energy. But then there is no self in meditative mind. And so the energy of the nature can function through such a mind if it is required to function. So I think these were some of the points which there may be, of course, many more, because they say that anything is possible for a meditative mind. And it is also said that there is no end to the depth and subtlety of existence. So a mind which jumps into an exploration of these subtler and deeper aspects of existence can never come to a point where it says that yes, this is the final, this is the last. There is no further depth and there is no further subtlety. It cannot say that. So it is like an unfathomable ocean. The life and the existence is like unfathomable ocean. And there is no limit to that. And so that does bring about a great sense of humility in oneself. Because the self and its activities and its concerns, everything looks so small with this deeper aspect of life that it loses all its significance, all its importance. So I think I have tried to bring out some of these things. And now your questions will help in bringing further clarity into our exploration.
Sir, thank you very much for clarifying what attention is. You have almost depersonalized it by referring it to it as a flow of energy. So that clears a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah.
Hello.
Hello? Yeah.
No, sir.
Oh, yeah. Ask.
Sir, can you tell any your experience that before meditation, how was life, and after meditation, how life now? So it will help us to understand more. Hear me, sir?
Yeah, I
Hello?
can hear you.
Achha, okay.
Yeah. You're asking my personal experience vis-a-vis meditation. No, but in what way it will help? Because you may use it to compare your situation and then measure whether you are meditating or not. But that is what we have been doing. You see, there are so many gurus. I mean, there is no shortage of such persons who will share their experiences of meditation and we will explain what is meditation and so on. And then you may make it as a yardstick to judge your situation and find out whether you have meditated at all or whether you are also experiencing the similar things. But then that is not meditation at all. So meditation is not copying somebody or his ways and means, but in meditation you have to discover your own ways. It is your own discovery. So the own discovery can happen only if you pay attention and you really try to understand something. Then it can happen. But if we merely collect information as to what are other people's experiences in meditation, and based on that information, draw our own inferences and conclusions, and then present a paper on meditation, saying what is meditation and how many people, and so what is the method and system. So you develop your own method and system to get those results. So that is, I think, the corporate approach to meditation. They're always interested in developing different systems and different methods which they can then utilize to produce certain desired effects, and then they can sell that system, that method for money. They will say, yes, if you want this, then this is the way. You do it and you will get it. So somebody else's experiences are not helpful at all. But you, by paying your own attention, you discover the things, right? And then that will be your own discovery. It is unique to yourself. So that is how the meditation one has to go about. And so if you go in a right way, you will find that your sensitivity increases tremendously. That means things which were going unnoticed by you, they come to your notice. And when they do come to your notice, there is a corresponding response to that. So many times it may happen to you that whatever somebody else is thinking, right, you may be able to sense it in your mind. But you can clearly see that you are not thinking that particular thought, and yet why that thought is there. So then with that attention, when you explore further, maybe you can come to the source of that thought. And therefore then you can say that that is one of the ways in which telepathy functions. So that is possible because of this enhanced sensitivity. That means you are not thinking about anything particular, and yet you see some thoughts appearing in your mind. Right? You just notice them. They can't find any foothold in you. And just as they have come, they also leave. There is no effort to retain them and all this thing. But since they have been noticed, the source can be traced back to a person. And you can say that maybe that person was thinking like that. So that kind of ability also comes because of that sensitivity. And then there are many other things. That means whenever you focus your attention on something, then you understand it. So there isn't any problem in that. So if somebody is telling you something and you attentively listen to that, then you are not listening only to the words, but you are also listening to whatever psychologically happening in that person. And so the listening is much deeper. And then there is no misunderstanding of the words, because the person may not be good at words as far as expressing his psychological things is concerned. But then since you are able to sense that psychological content itself, so you are not misled by those words. So there are so many such things which you can observe in your own life if you are in this exploration of meditation, the kind of meditation Krishna just has talked about. So there then you don't need somebody else's experiences to verify, but the things will be self-evident to you. you yourself will notice the difference in your life before the meditation and the life once the meditative state is there. Yes.
Thank you, sir. More away to moment, we'll realize the things.
Yes.
But it seems to be difficult that we are aware and persons around us are not aware. So irritated. Again, we see as it is, and we have to go ahead.
No.
And sometimes,
Yeah. No. What I'm saying is that irritation is my response, my reaction.
okay.
So therefore, that also needs to be observed. Because the very fact that a reaction is arising in me, which means that there is psychological content there, which is yet to be worked out. And therefore, then you can focus your attention on that why that content is there, how it got it there, and so on. So you see, there is all the time work is being done upon oneself. You are working on yourself in the sense that you are observing, you are finding out what is that content, how it is shaping your life, how it is influencing everything that you do, and so on. So there is a lot to observe, there is a lot to do. Right? But if we get caught up in small things, then the bigger work will be missing. So somebody just says something and it irritates you, and that irritation, that state of irritation, you don't know how long it will remain. And because of that state of irritation, you won't be able to focus on other things, though they may be important, and yet you are not able to focus on them, and so on. So many times the small things, they deprive you of from attending the major things also. So that is where the awareness is required of what actually is happening.
So sometimes we it is inner voice of perception of thoughts, which
Yeah,
is
I mean, there
leading
is
us
no
to
need.
take action.
There is no need to identify,
Okay.
because it is the thinker who wants to identify, who wants to be sure whether it is inner voice or not. Because the thinker is very much wants that, yes, there should be inner voice, so he should be guided, because that gives it special status, and therefore it is more bothered to find out, right? But the inner voice itself is not concerned with what it is. So I think the best approach in this case is each one has his own common sense, so-called common sense. One can use that to find out whether what one thinking is right or not right, whether one's response is a right kind of response or not, or what kind of response it is, and so on. So I think that will be good enough, because whenever there is an inner voice, right, it will be noticed if you are open to it. And being open to it means not being occupied with the activities of thought all the time. So they say that attention has that quality, that even though a person is doing very important work requiring full attention, and yet the slightest whisper of that inner voice will not be missed by such a person. because he has that kind of sensitivity. So one doesn't have to worry as to whether there is an inner voice or there isn't an inner voice, or whether the perception has happened or not happened, and so on. But these are all the worries of the thinker who wants that perception, who wants that inner voice, and therefore very eager to find out whether there was inner voice or whether there was perception, and so on. Because then that will enhance its status. It will make him something special. Because everybody doesn't have this inner voice, but he has. So he is something special, something great. So he has achieved something. So it is just strengthening of the ego. It will just go in strengthening that ego, which then will become an impediment for that inner voice to function or for that perception to happen. So I think one shouldn't worry about those things at all. One has to keep one's house clean, orderly, so that it is ready at all times to receive that inner voice, or it is ready for that perception to happen. But when it will happen, you don't know. When that inner voice will communicate, you don't know. But it can happen that the inner voice wants to communicate and you are not ready. Then that is a missed opportunity.
May I
So
ask, sir?
that should not happen.
The meditator is always struggling with a fragmented mind which overpowers him. The scattered thoughts create their own conflicts. How can we perceive the totality?
Yeah, if the mind is scattered like that, it cannot perceive totality at all. So a scattered mind has to first attend to its scatteredness. It cannot think of perceiving the totality. So a mind which is fragmented, it has to first observe that fragmentation. It has to be first concerned with that fragmentation. And through observation, find out why is it fragmented. And by paying attention, end that fragmentation. Only then it will be capable of perceiving the wholeness, the totality. But then, without doing that, a fragmented mind can only imagine what could be that totality. And that imagination may not have any effect on the day-to-day life of that person, or effect on his approach to various things. So only a mind which is not fragmented is capable of perceiving holistically or perceiving the whole. And therefore, the first concern of the fragmented mind should be to find out why it is fragmented. What are the factors responsible for that fragmentation? And then through observation, end all those factors. Then only it is capable of seeing the whole.
सर एक छोटासा क्वेश्चन मराठीतून विचारू
विचारा.
ते एक ह्या स्टडी करत करत एक वाक्य असं सापडलं की आत्मसाक्षात्कार नंतर काय, जसं मी तुम्हाला विचारलं की पर्सनल एक्सपिरियन्सचा मला वेगळा अर्थ होता की त्याच्यानंतर काय फरक पडतो, त्यांनी असं उत्तर दिलं होतं की पानी भरता था, लकड़ी काटता था, अब पानी भरा जा रहा है, लकड़ी काटी जा रही है. He just observer of what is happening. So म्हणजे स्पेशल माणूस होत नाही नंतर आत्मसाक्षात्कार झाल्यानंतर. तो काही म्हणतात तसं त्याला स्पेशल स्टेटस वगैरे नाही मिळत. असतात त्या गोष्टी तशा असतात, फक्त तो रिॲक्ट होत नाही आणि गोष्टी घडतात त्या फक्त तो ऑब्झर्व करतो. हे बरोबर आहे का?
No, that is very limited understanding of that, because if the deeper and subtler aspects of life, if they only mean only that which we have described, then it is a very, very limited understanding of that. And we have said that actually there is no end, there is no limit to the depth and subtlety of life. It is almost limitless. So something limitless we are describing in then as only that kind of small image, and saying that yes, that is how the life of a meditative mind is, then I think it's a mistake. It's not only that much. In fact, there are so many different things which may not be manifest at the physical level, and yet they may be there at this subtler level in that different dimension, corresponding to which there may be nothing at the physical level. So then how that can be expressed in terms of words? And said it cannot be. So what probably these people, the kind of answers they give is just to give little satisfaction to a questioner and at least make him feel happy that yes, he understood something. So that is just pleasing the questioner. But Krishnaji doesn't have that kind of approach at all. So either you understand or you don't understand. So there is no such thing that, okay, you described in whatever limited words, and then the person interprets those words in his own way and then understands things according to that interpretation and then feels happy that he has understood something. So that's not the way at all. So most of these people, I mean, even our saints and everybody, they have described, but that description is not that which they have described. And what we receive is only a description. And we have no idea of what that description is of. And therefore, we use our own logic, we use our own resources, our own knowledge to interpret that description and draw our own conclusions and then say that yes, that is what they have been saying. But I think the meditative mind doesn't understand things in that way. It is the thinker who understands things in that way. And therefore, it is a very, very limited understanding. Or many times it is more a misunderstanding than understanding. But a meditative mind directly perceives that is what is being conveyed, what is being presented. And therefore, there is no scope for misunderstanding there. So
Directly sense.
Yeah, directly sees. Yeah, directly
No
sees.
sense. No
Not says,
senses.
sees. Because something which has no correspondence at the physical level, it cannot be described in words, or you cannot point out anything at the physical level through which you may be able to grasp that. So to come upon such things, you only have to come in contact with that different dimension. Only then those things will be perceived. But without such a contact, we are missing all those things.
Professor Krishna says that there are two parts in the human consciousness. The first part is the subjective part, that is comprising of thought and its creation, that is I, me, myself, etc. And it is different from person to person. The second part is the universal part, comprising of observation, awareness, attention, and perception. These two parts combine and create what we call an experience. He is also very emphatic to say that Krishnaji never proposed these kind of two parts in the human consciousness, but he found it a little more convenient and to understand the teaching. My question is, when you say there are two parts in the consciousness, are we not introducing a division and therefore conflict? What do you say?
Yes. So, yeah, I would say that why only two parts? There are as many parts in consciousness as it has the content, because the whole of our consciousness is a fragmented thing. And why the fragment should be limited only to two? There are innumerable fragments, and therefore there is a conflict. Now, if you put awareness, attention also as part of that consciousness, then they are also fragments. And therefore, they are no way different than the other fragments in that consciousness. And therefore, there is no qualitative difference at all. But Krishnaji doesn't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So,
sir,
what can
my
happen is
question
that, what can happen is that a thinker who is trying to understand these things, right, for the sake of its own convenience, he is creating this division. So he has his own image of what is awareness, what is attention, what are all those universal qualities, and what universal means, and so on. And he has his own images about these things. And he says that, yes, that is one part of this. And then he has other images which he considers as the other content of consciousness. And therefore, he has that other image. And so, the thinker, in his endeavor to understand what Krishnaji is talking about, has divided its own content into two parts. And he says that one part is what Krishnaji is talking about, and the other part is what the thinker actually is. Right? But all this is the play of the thinker. And therefore, essentially not different at all. So there is no attention there, there is no awareness there, nothing. Only the imagined awareness, imagined attention. And therefore, I don't think one has to give much weightage to that statement. It's a false statement.
Sir, as it is, the human consciousness is dominated by thought and its creations. The fears, the sorrow, the pleasure, the agony, the suffering, etc., etc. All those things are there, of which we are aware. And as Krishnaji says, we have to empty that consciousness. What Professor Krishna is trying to say is, the universal part is also there in the consciousness, but it is dormant. It is not allowed to surface fully and operational, because human beings have given a lot of importance to the faculty of thinking, because the faculty of thinking has brought so much of progress in the physical world, in the outer world, technology, medicine, surgery, etc. And so we have neglected the universal part which is inherently available in every human being. So if you are able to empty your consciousness of the parts created by the human thought, there is a possibility that the dormant part, the universal part, can function and occupy the space provided there.
No, then it is not an empty consciousness at all. I think it is a complete misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what Krishnaji is talking about. Krishnaji has clearly said that consciousness is made up of its contents.
Yeah.
And without the content, consciousness doesn't exist as we understand. So if the whole content of consciousness is put together by thought,
Yes.
then that universal aspect is also put together by thought. And if the consciousness is emptied, then the whole thing is gone, whether it is universal or personal or whatever it is, because the whole content of consciousness has to end. Only then you can say that the consciousness is really empty. That means then there is no consciousness at all. There is only an emptiness. And in that emptiness, different things can happen. But to say that consciousness contains the universal, right, then that universal also must be put together by thought. As Krishnaji has made it very clear that the content of consciousness is put together by thought. We had one whole workshop just on consciousness, what Krishnaji has talked about consciousness. And there we have clearly quoted those statements of Krishnaji. He says that the consciousness is made up of its content. The contents of consciousness are put together by thought.
Yeah.
And since the thinker is also put together by thought, right, so thinker is also part of the content of consciousness. In fact, if you examine deeply, then you can say that the only content of consciousness is the thinker.
Yeah.
If the thinker has ended, then that means the whole content of consciousness has ended, because the thinker is made up of all that content of consciousness. And so there is no question of something else being the content of consciousness which is not part of that consciousness. It cannot be, because then it is not the content of consciousness at all. So I think that is a misleading statement and completely contradicts what Krishnaji has talked about.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So one more of the question here. So rather it is a peculiar question, maybe foolish question. So what I want to ask is, can the meditation happen without any effort by itself? Can the meditation happen without any effort by itself?
Yeah, it can happen, but you can't wait for it to happen. Because what can happen is the thinker is not active at all, and therefore there is a kind of quiet state of mind. And in that quiet state of mind, there could be a touch of that different dimension. And with that touch, immediately your state of mind is changed. And that changed state of mind is unaffected by whatever that is going on around you. So this, you have not practiced this, you have not invited nothing. It has happened on its own. It can happen. And then some people may treat it as the grace of God or this or that, but one doesn't have to put it in that way at all. One can only say that, yes, the mind happened to be completely silent and the activities of the thinker were standstill. How that happened, we don't know. But then there was
Immense thanks
that,
for
right? But then you can't wait for it. You may wait till the end of your life and it may not happen. There is no time frame according to which you can find out whether how likely it is going to happen. Right? But if you live your daily life properly, that means without creating psychological disorder, then this is more likely to happen. That means the probability of this kind of thing happening is more. That's all that can be said. Yeah.
Sir, it means we have to take some initiative or efforts at initially
We have
to
to do
start
some
this
work. Yeah. And
work.
that work
Okay.
will become effort if we are not sufficiently interested. Then it will become an
Okay.
effort. But many times to break out of habit or to break out of routine, right, creates a sense of effort, because there is a lot of resistance to change and one has to overcome that resistance. But if one is sufficiently interested, then that sense of effort will not be there. Then out of that interest, you will be gladly doing all those things that are required. Right? A person who is interested in business, right? So he does lots of things which appears as a lot of effort to the other person, right? But it doesn't appear as effort to that person who is working for his business. So he will gladly do all those things without having that sense of effort, because he is very much interested in that.
Sir, some rituals helps, but because at starting, when I cannot remain aware all the time. It was very difficult. Now also it is difficult to aware all the time. So some rituals or some starting techniques to be aware, like you can observe your breathing, or you can do some things. So it helps actually for the journey.
Yeah, it may help in a limited way,
Ah,
but that's all. Whatever you could have done as the first step, you will be doing it only after practicing all those things. So that's the only difference.
it's very intact. So to release,
Yes.
it will take some time.
Yes,
And
yes.
some habits are. The second question is, some habits are necessary to do our work fast. Daily works we can
Yeah.
do fast. So by
Yeah, at the physical level, yes, a habit means a routine kind of response. It may help in quickly responding to a situation. Okay, that is what the machines also do. The functioning of a machine is out of routine, and therefore there is immediate response to a given situation. But then the machine is not sure whether the response is adequate to a given situation. Right? It only knows that if situation is this should be the response. But the response, whether it is adequate or not, the machine will not know. And in that situation also, if there are other factors for which the machine is not programmed, then the machine is missing those factors and the effect of those factors on the situation. So therefore, the response will be incomplete. So that is what happens with human beings also. If they respond out of habit, right, So, well, if that response meets the situation, then it is nice, good. But if there are other factors, then it may not meet that situation. So that is where then the paying of attention is required. That means attention is required. So by paying attention, you can learn about the situation. And based on that learning, then the response comes, which is more likely to be adequate than a mechanical response. Lot of time, our mechanical response is based on incomplete listening also. Because we are so much habituated to responding in a certain way that if somebody is telling us something, then before he has completed what he is telling, we already conclude that this is what he is saying. And then based on that conclusion, we immediately respond. And then later on, it turns out that the person was saying something quite different than what I had concluded. And so my response turned out to be wrong. And that wrong response will generate then consequences. So I think the attention cannot be replaced by habit just on the pretext of immediate response. So attention has its own value, its own ways of responding to a situation. And the response of attention is out of understanding. So more likely to be adequate than a mechanical response.
Sir, last small question,
Yes.
practical question.
विचारा
Transfer
मराठीत विचारा
की मी समजा मी अवेअर होतोय आणि माझ्या बऱ्याच रिॲक्शन अप्रोप्रिएट होत आहेत. पण समजा माझ्या घरात असेल किंवा आजूबाजूला सोसायटीमध्ये असेल, पीपल आर नॉट अवेअर, देन दे रिॲक्ट ऑर दे डू समथिंग. सो ऑलवेज मला तो जो त्रास होतोय तो म्हणतात तो पण तुम्ही ऑब्झर्व करायचा आहे. तो फक्त ऑब्झर्व करायचा आहे की त्याच्यावर काही ऍक्शन्स पण घ्यायचे आहे. तो तसं त्या केसमध्ये काय करायचं?
No, you see, actually, why there is this suffering? This suffering is because I want something from the other people, either recognition, or I want them to know that I am different, I am understanding this awareness and this and that. And so therefore, they should not take you for granted, or they should not take you lightly. And therefore, they should behave in a certain way with you. Now, if that is your expectation, then that is what will cause suffering. Because people may not behave as per our expectation. So Krishna ji has said that as long as you want something from others, you are inviting sorrow. Because if you don't get that something, then you are going to feel that sorrow. You will suffer. So one has to find out, why does one want that thing from others? The others are anyway behaving as per their conditioning. And they are perceiving me, or they are seeing me also according to their conditioning. That means they have formed images about me based on their interaction with me in the past. And according to those images, they look at me, they judge me, and so on. And according to that, they interpret my actions and then respond to those. Now, in this, everything is theirs. Nothing is yours except that interaction, whatever it may be. Right? Everything else is of the other person. Now, why I should be bothered about what the other persons are creating on their own about me? So let them create whatever they want to create. Right? But let me be what I am. Let me be concerned with my own life and see how am I getting affected by their creation. Right? Because that will be my only concern. If I do get affected by what they think about me, then it is a matter for my concern, that why am I getting affected? And therefore to go into it and maybe expose those elements in me which are getting affected by them, and then work it out, so that then it doesn't make any difference to me what they think about me and so on.
Yes, sir,
Now,
but why I should suffer while living together?
yeah, you are suffering because of you, not because of them. Because suffering is basically, what is the nature of suffering? If things do not happen according to your wishes, if they don't happen according to your hopes, if they don't happen according to what you want them to happen, then that is what is suffering for such a person. Right? So he suffers because he is put in a state where things are not happening as per his expectations. And therefore, that is a painful experience for such a person. If everything is going against one's wishes, against one's expectations, right, then that causes quite a lot of pain in a person. So if you are living in a house where everybody is against you, then it's not a pleasant experience to live there in that house. One may want to just escape from that, maybe run away from that house, and maybe live somewhere independently. So that is the nature of suffering. But if you don't want anything from anybody, then where is the suffering? Then all that you may say is that, well, these people, they interact with you in this way, and this kind of interaction is not a right kind of interaction, and therefore you have to do something about it. So either you explain to those people or interact with them in certain way so as to clear off that misunderstanding, right? Or if you feel that that is too much to do, then you can simply walk out and live independently all by yourself. But in all that, there is no sense of suffering,
Okay.
because you are not expecting anything from anybody. You don't want anything from anybody. And so you are merely observing their reactions or their interactions with you. And through that observation, you are finding out what kind of interactions they are. So what is their attitude, what do they think about you, and so on. And then whether it is a right thing for you to continue to live there, or whether there is a way to change their thinking, and then you start working on that. But in all this, there is no sense of suffering, because if you suffer, then you may not be able to act rightly, because then you will react out of that suffering. So which means that you will try to cause suffering to those others also, which may not be a right action.
Suppose a practical example ki COVID and not taking sufficient measures for that. Then I can also suffer from COVID. So this is physical, practical things. So how I can observe, and even explaining, they are not listening. Suppose so, how we can not add
Is it
psychological elements in
is
it.
it for you or is it for the others? Are you saying
Is
that
it is for
if I
my
am suffering,
precautions also.
if I am suffering from COVID and government is not taking any notice of all that?
No, not government, not
Whatever.
government. Suppose in my family, there are 4-5 members. Example, and
Yeah,
sufficient
that's right.
measures.
I mean, say in a family, when one person is infected with a highly infectious disease like COVID, then how the others should respond? Naturally, their response will be based on fear.
No, sir.
We
No,
don't
sir.
want
That
to
is
get.
not my question. That is not my
Okay.
question. No, environment is that, and we are taking sufficient measures so that COVID should not come to our home. And
Yes.
one person is not listening that things. He is not taking sufficient measures so that he
Okay,
can
okay.
bring COVID and I can also suffer. So how we can
Yes. Yeah, I think only thing is that one has to talk to that person and somehow appeal to his intellect that what he is doing is not right and he has to take proper precautions. And probably if you have a right kind of relationship with that person, right, then he may listen to you and then he may change his ways. But suppose in the absence of such relationship, right, he just behaves the way he behaves, right, then you have to take precautions on your own. But then since you are staying in the same house, naturally you are always in a danger of contracting that disease. So then you have an option either to continue to stay in that house or just shift or confine yourself to a room and not coming much in contact with other things. And if at all you come in contact, then that means you will have to do a lot more than otherwise you would have done. Because then everything will be suspicious and you don't know whether you should touch it or should not touch it and so on. So it's not an easy situation, right? But can be managed. Then one has to work on improving one's immunity and all those kinds of things. Yeah, one will have to do more work on oneself than otherwise would have required.
Yeah,
without
Paresh sir.
adding any psychological elements.
I mean, but if you are psychologically perturbed, then that will create further complication. Then you may not be able to function properly. Because every time you wash your hands, you will be thinking, oh, this foolish person, because of him, I have to keep on washing my hands all the time. Because of him, I have to keep on wearing the mask even in the house. And because of him, I can't touch this, I can't touch that. Right? So all that is the psychological involvement. And therefore, that is going to create its own effect. Because then many times you may get fed up with this and you may say, well, today I don't wash my hands. And that may be precisely the point when the corona will find entry in you. But that's happening because of the psychological reactions, psychological involvement in this. But if you just plainly think about the whole matter and just do whatever necessary, then that's the end of it.
Sir,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, sir, I have a doubt.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Ask Paresh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm trying to understand the flow here. So one is very aware and attentive, and then meditation happens by itself, and that will that will lead to emptying of the content of consciousness. After that, there is some understanding that happens, and that will lead to right action. Is this flow correct? And
No. There are so many assumptions in this,
okay,
and sequence is also not very correct. So, see, just because one is attentive doesn't mean that meditation will happen.
Okay.
I mean, that whole energy of attention has to be utilized to explore the deeper aspects of life. Right? And only after that the meditation is likely to happen. Because without such exploration, or without putting all that energy of attention into this inquiry, there may not be any contact with the deeper and subtler aspects. And hence then it is not a meditative state.
Inquiry of meditation or inquiry of a deeper self?
Yeah, the inquiry about the deeper aspects of existence, right,
Okay.
itself is a part of meditation.
Okay.
Because only through that inquiry there can be a contact with those deeper and subtler aspects.
This is part of thought process, or this is part of attention, the
This
inquiry?
is part of attention. This is not part of thought process. You may begin with thought process, right? But
Okay.
as the inquiry proceeds, the thought comes to its end because it cannot go further. It has reached its limit, and therefore it simply stops. And then there is only the energy of attention. So that is what leads to meditation. Right? So initially your inquiry may begin by thought. You may start thinking, you may start questioning and so on. And
Yeah.
as you explore logically and rationally, the whole thinking process comes to a point where no further logical rational thinking is possible. So there the whole thinking process itself gets paused. It stops because it has reached its logical end, logical limit, and it cannot simply cross that limit. It is incapable. So therefore all that it can do is just stay there quietly, right? But if it comes back, then it will involve itself in other activities. Then it will say that, well, there is no point in going further because there is nothing to go further. And therefore it returns and then gets involved in other activities which it can do, right? But without return, if it can stay there with all its energy, then that energy of attention can make the things happen, some different things happen, which is not possible for the thought to make them happen.
So inquiry happens involuntarily through attention.
No, we are not saying, we have said in fact that inquiry may begin with thinking.
Yes. Yeah.
Because when Krishnaji is discussing, he is asking, he says, think it out, find out, use your brains, right? So we are employing all our resources of thinking to find out, to inquire into something. And in that inquiry, right, when thought reaches its logical end, right, then it becomes quiet. So here the thought is quiet on its own. It's not made quiet.
Got. Yeah.
Because it has reached its limit. It simply can't go further. And it doesn't see any point in returning back also. Because returning back means again getting involved in the same routine, same things and so on. So all that it can do is simply stay there where it is. right? So at that point, that energy of attention, right? Then all the energy is available there. It's gathered there at that point, and which can then penetrate that totally different dimension. But the thought has to remain there, right? Non-functional, and not return back and get involved into other activities.
Sir, can I just add few points?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Good morning, Kisharji. Durga here.
Good morning. Yeah.
A few few quotations that regarding meditation, sir. I just wanted to share.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he says, meditation comes darkly and silently when you are not aware of it.
Yeah.
So that one quotation that is coming to my mind, and he says, this also says, you as thought needs to be seen completely, and thought needs to completely come to a standstill. Otherwise, as long as that entity is there, the meditation cannot happen. That's one thing I have understood, sir. And second thing is, one of commentaries on living, long time back, I remember reading one quotation. He says, sir, like you have to come naked to it. That means stripped of all thought, everything, seen everything and kept it away. You have to come naked to it. Then it may happen or it may not happen. You have to just prepare the ground. And I feel, sir, like whatever the exhaustive talks and discussions all lead to preparing the ground only, sir. That's what I feel. Where he talked extensively, the various thought, how it plays tricks and how it misleads, and how, like you have given so many examples right now, sir, like how we get affected by other people saying some things to us, and how we reactive mind all the time springs and all. So all this exhaustive work, it is seeing thought in ourselves and how it plays mischief in us, and in all around people also. And again and again, he also brings it back that, the misery, the strife, and he says, when your house is on fire, you act. You don't sit quietly and, you don't keep pondering and what to do, which bucket to use, whether the person who is helping you, is it a black or white, he says like that.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
all these quotations. And one more thing I just want to add, sir, like regarding the realm of transformation, recently I have come upon this text, sir. He says you have to transform. He is directly telling you this is a responsibility of you to transform. I just want to expand it, sir. Like you also said, like we don't have any control over how things happen in this world, in our lives also. Why the things happen the way they happen. That's one thing for certain, sir. And secondly, and neither we have a control about our own emotions. We need to be aware of ourselves. We can't act upon them, we can't change them, we can't modify them. Maybe through observation and attention, they may fall away, they may take their own place. So I feel, in fact, when I read that statement, I also was quite surprised. You have to transform. Maybe he says, when you have seen everything and you kept it aside in the silent mind, maybe it may happen, something like that, sir. So I thought, let me just share all this, whatever I have read recently. So maybe our focus, everybody's focus should be how thought plays tricks in our own lives, and seeing thought, in all its, layers and layers and multifarious ways, and that's all the work maybe everybody has to do. And that's what maybe the lesson we all need to understand from this session of
Because this, Krishna also said that this very inquiry into what is meditation is part of meditation.
So maybe we are just like, all these things are setting a more, and, like everybody is observing. All this is work that is going on.
That's right.
Discussion.
Good. So we have been meditating in this past last more than 1.5 hours.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, sorry, one quick one, sir. Maybe you can take it up in the next session, or next workshop
Yeah.
also. So I find that my thoughts, I'm completely scattered. My thoughts, everything is scattered. My attention is also scattered.
Yeah.
So have I understood correctly that my attention is scattered because the attention has no energy?
No, I don't think you can say attention is scattered. You can say that attention is not there. It is the thought scattered. Yeah.
Yes,
It is
sir.
the thought that is scattered.
So which means attention.
And scattering of thought is actually, that is the nature of thought. The very nature of thought is that it is always scattered. So Patanjali has given an interesting description of that. So it says that whenever the thoughts are simply shifting from one thing to another, to another, to another, like a butterfly, as it keeps on shifting from one flower to another, to third. So like that, the mind is just shifting from one thought to another thought to another thought. And so that state of mind, he calls it as the butterfly mind or kshipta mind. And when a mind is taken over by a psychological reaction, right, and therefore completely influenced by it and acting out of it, therefore it is not able to see things factually, right? It is only misunderstanding things. So that state of mind, he's calling as mudha. Mudha means actually the stupid mind. It doesn't understand anything and simply getting influenced by a psychological reaction and acting out of that. And then he talks about the another state of mind where instead of a psychological reaction, an idea has taken over the person. So he's so much obsessed by that idea that he can't think outside that idea. Everything he will interpret in terms of that idea. Right? So such state of mind he is describing as vikshipta. So vikshipta is also, it means the unusual, not normal, something strange. And then after that, when none of these things are there and the person is able to focus his attention on something which he wants to understand, then that is the other state of mind. He has used some other word for that. That word is not so common, so I don't remember it just now. And then there is still further state, and that is the meditative state he talks about. So which is quite similar to what we have been talking about during these dialogues on meditation. Time to stop.
Yes, Kishore.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kishore. Thank you.